The air tasted like powdered regret. Dust, thick and clinging, coated my tongue, a familiar sensation that dredged up phantom cravings. Dust and relics. The name felt like a judgment, a perfect encapsulation of my own state. Silas, my supervisor, hadn't offered a greeting, only a curt nod towards the back room, and a list of tasks long enough to bury me alive. The fog outside pressed against the windows, a grey, viscous curtain blurring the already indistinct street. It wasn't just outside, though. It seemed to have infiltrated the very mortar of the building, a damp chill seeping into my bones. The shop itself was a labyrinth, aisles twisted and turned, crammed with forgotten lives and chipped porcelain dolls, tarnished silverware, stacks of yellowed sheet music. Each object hummed with a silent, unsettling history. I ran a trembling hand over a velvet chaise lounge, the fabric brittle beneath my touch. The scent of decay was potent, layered with the faint, sickly sweetness of potpourri long past its prime. My pulse quickened, a tremor of panic rising in my chest, the silence broken only by the swish scritch. Scritch of something unseen within the walls was almost unbearable. Silas's instructions were vague. Organize. Dust. Don't ask questions. Discretion, apparently, was the currency of this place. I tried to focus on the work, the methodical repetition, a fragile anchor in the swirling anxiety. Each drawer I opened released a cloud of dust motes dancing in the weak light. Each item I handled a small, tangible connection to a past I couldn't comprehend. The rhythmic chanting, low and guttural, pulsed from the basement, a discordant heartbeat beneath the shop's oppressive silence. It wasn't a language I recognized, yet it resonated with a primal unease that tightened my throat. My hands shook as I picked up a chipped teacup, its floral pattern faded and worn. The memories surfaced then, unwelcome and sharp, 30 the tremor. In my hands the desperate need, the hollow ache in my gut. I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting the familiar wave of nausea. This job, Silas had said, was a chance, a clean slate, a lie perhaps, but a necessary one. I moved toward the back of the shop, drawn by a peculiar darkness. A display case stood shrouded in shadow, its contents obscured by a thick layer of dust. It was filled with mirrors by not whole, pristine surfaces, but fragments, shards, slivers of reflective glass, pieced together in a chaotic mosaic. As I wiped the dust away, a wave of dizziness washed over me. I felt watched, not by Silas, who remained a silent sentinel near the front counter, but by something else, something unseen. A prickling sensation crawled across my skin, raising gooseflesh on my arms. The mirrors themselves seemed to absorb the light, reflecting not the shop's decay, but a void. I caught a glimpse of my own face, deed gaunt, haunted 2D, and quickly looked away. The chanting from the basement intensified, weaving its way into my thoughts. "They're watching, Ting," a voice whispered in my head, a voice that sounded disturbingly like my own. I told myself it was the exhaustion, the lingering effects of withdrawal. I reached for a particularly large shard, intending to clean it thoroughly. As my fingers brushed against the cool glass, a jolt, like static electricity, shot up my arm. The shop seemed to shimmer, the monochrome decay momentarily fracturing. And then, for a fleeting, impossible instant, I saw it. A vibrant street scene, 40 cobblestone streets, bustling crowds, horse-drawn carriages, all rendered in a riot of color. Laughter, the clatter of hooves, the murmur of voices in 2D, a cacophony of life utterly alien to this place. The image vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving me breathless and disoriented. A distorted, mournful clang resonated, a brief phantom echo of a streetcar bell. The vision lingered, a phantom limb of memory. Cobblestones, laughter, a vibrancy that felt both alien and intimately familiar. My pulse hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the shop, a suppressive silence. The distorted clang of that streetcar bell still resonated faintly in my ears, a mocking echo of a life I'd never known. Silas hadn't reacted to my stumble, his gaze fixed on some unseen point beyond the dust-laden shelves. I needed to understand. Needed to anchor myself to something tangible, something beyond the fractured reflections and the chanting from below, the shop's history. That was the logical place to start. I navigated the labyrinthine aisles, the velvet chaise lounge feeling colder than before, the scent of decay sharper. My hands trembled as I reached for a ledger tucked away in a forgotten corner. The leather was brittle, the pages yellowed and fragile. The entries were sparse, a haphazard record of acquisitions and sales, mostly illegible. Dates swam before my eyes, blurring into a meaningless jumble. Then a clipping, a faded newspaper, brittle as autumn leaves, slipped from the ledger. "Tragic fire claims lives in Northwood District." The headline screamed in faded ink, 1928. A photograph accompanied the article's summary, a grainy image of a building engulfed in flames. The architecture was vaguely familiar, a ghostly echo of the street scene I glimpsed in the shard. A pang of something akin to recognition twisted in my gut. The chanting from the basement seemed to intensify, a low thrum vibrating through the floorboards. "Thive want you to know," a voice whispered, a chillingly calm intrusion into my thoughts. I returned to the mirrors, drawn by an invisible current. The shard felt heavier in my hand, radiating a subtle chill. As I wiped the dust, the vision returned. Sharper this time. A streetcar rattled past, the passengers blurred figures in a sepia-toned world. A woman in a flapper dress laughed, her face indistinct, yet familiar. The scent of coal smoke and something sweeter, like burnt sugar, filled my nostrils. A distorted music box began to play, a fragmented waltz that seemed to claw at the edges of my sanity. Tink, tink, tink. The melody stuttered, punctuated by the rhythmic drip of water from a leaky pipe. I caught a glimpse of movement in the reflection. A Siamese cat, sleek and black, with eyes like chips of emerald. Its mouth curved into a disturbingly human-like grin. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. It wasn't tea there a moment ago. I blinked, but it remained, watching me with an unsettling intensity. The chanting swelled, a chorus of voices rising in a dissonant harmony. "Silas," says voice, low and gravelly, cut through the rising tide of dread. "Meddling with the past is a dangerous game, Seraphina." He stood near the doorway, his face obscured by shadow. "Some things are best left undisturbed." His words felt like a veiled threat, a warning laced with a meaning I could toot quite grasp. A metallic rasp, like claws on wood, echoed from the shadows behind him. A headache blossomed behind my eyes, a throbbing pressure that made me sway. The room tilted, the monochrome decay blurring at the edges. I gripped the shard tighter, desperate for something to hold onto. The visions intensified, a relentless assault on my senses. I saw a child's face, pale and gaunt, staring out from a window. I heard a woman sob, muffled and desperate. I smelled burnt sugar and something else, something acrid and metallic. I stared at the cat in the reflection, trying to discern its expression. It seemed to be mocking me. And then I saw it. A ripple, a distortion in the glass behind the feline-esque grin. My own image, Seraphina Nguyen, wavered, flickering in and out of existence. I felt a sensation of falling, of dissolving, as if I were losing my grip on reality. A brief, echoing gasp escaped my lips, a strangled sound swallowed by the oppressive silence. It seemed to emanate not from my own throat, but from the drain at my feet. Glug, glug, a slow, unsettling rhythm echoed from the darkness below. The headache pulsed, a relentless drumbeat against the silence. The cat's grin lingered in my vision, a mocking echo in the fractured reflections. Silas's warning, some things are best left undisturbed. Something felt like a physical weight pressing down on me. I needed to move, to break free from the suffocating atmosphere of the shop, to understand. My gaze fell upon a pile of discarded trinkets, a jumble of tarnished silver and cracked porcelain. Amongst them, a brass compass lay half-hidden, its surface coated in a layer of dust. I picked it up, the metal cold and heavy in my hand. The needle spun wildly, a frantic dance across the face of the dial. It felt alive, the chanting from below intensified, a low, guttural hum that resonated in my bones. "Follow, follow," it seemed to whisper. "Find." I tried to still the needle, to force it to settle, but it resisted, vibrating with an unsettling energy. It locked, abruptly pointing towards a direction I hadn't consciously registered for the back of the shop, towards a narrow alleyway I hadn't noticed before. A compulsion, sharp and undeniable, seized me. I had to go there. Silas stood silhouetted in the doorway, his face a mask of shadows. He didn't speak, didn't try to stop me, just watched. His silence was more unnerving than any reprimand. I pushed past him, the bell above the door chiming a discordant note as I stepped out into the oppressive fog. The alleyway was a chasm of shadows, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something indefinably stale. The fog clung to everything, a spectral shroud that muted the sounds of the city. The chanting grew louder, a chorus of voices that seemed to emanate from the very stones beneath my feet. Tink, tink, huh. The faint echo of a music box drifted from somewhere unseen. The compass needle remained fixed, unwavering in its direction. I tried to turn back, to veer off into a side street, but the needle pulled me forward, a silent, insistent guide. Each step was a struggle against an invisible force. The fog swirled around me, blurring the edges of reality. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the shop's window 40, a distorted image of Seraphina Nguyen, her face pale and drawn. But superimposed over my own features, I saw another face, stern and unyielding footing, my mother's. The image vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving me disoriented and breathless. The memory of her disapproval, her constant disappointment, pressed down on me. Failure had always said, "Feed, you'll never be enough." The compass led me deeper into the alleyway past overflowing bins and crumbling brick walls. The chanting reached a fever pitch, a swirling vortex of sound that threatened to overwhelm me. I felt a growing sense of dread, a certainty that I was walking towards something terrible. I tried to slow my pace to fight against the compass's relentless pull. I tried to convince myself that it was just a faulty mechanism, a trick of the light, but the needle remained stubbornly fixed, unwavering in its direction. It felt less like a tool, more like a tether binding me to an unknown fate. Click, click. The sound of the needle was the only sound that cut through the chanting. Silas emerged from the shadows, his silhouette a dark sentinel at the alley's entrance. He didn't speak, didn't move. Just watched, his eyes like chips of obsidian. A faint metallic rasp, like the scraping of metal against stone, emanated from the darkness behind him. Then the compass spun wildly, the needle whirling in a frantic circle. The chanting reached a crescendo, a deafening roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the alleyway. And then, as abruptly as it began, the spinning stopped. The needle settled, pointing directly back towards the entrance of dust and relics. Standing in the heart of the fog-choked alleyway, the compass guided me back to the shop, back to Silas, back to whatever waited for me within. A distorted whisper, laced with malice, slithered through the fog, barely audible above the chanting. Seraphina, the shard felt cold against my palm, a sliver of fractured time. The vision slammed into me, not as a fleeting image this time, but a sustained bleed through. The alleyway dissolved, replaced by a bustling street scene, flapper dresses, Model T Fords, the scent of coal smoke and something sweeter, like spun sugar. The fog remained clinging to the edges of this phantom 1928, a spectral curtain between realities. It wasn't a picture show anymore. It was Sivdi being there. The rhythmic chanting, always a background hum, intensified, syncing with the clatter of horseshoes on cobblestone. Tink, tink. Asterisk, a jaunty piano tune spilled from an unseen doorway, momentarily eclipsing the chanting, then swallowed by it again. I blinked, and the modern alleyway returned, the phantom street receding like a tide. The disorientation was a physical thing, a lurch in my stomach. A bruise blossomed on my forearm, a dull purple stain against my skin. I hadn't remembered hitting anything. Hallucinations, I muttered, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Just hallucinations. Silas' face swam into focus, his expression unreadable. He was standing further away than I thought he was, almost swallowed by the fog. "The past isn't tia spectator sport, Seraphina," he said, his voice low and gravelly, barely audible above the chanting. "It demands participation." His words felt like a judgment, echoing the constant refrain of my mother as disappointment. Failure. You'll never be enough. Asterisk, the memory pressed down, a suffocating weight. I scrubbed at the bruise, a futile attempt to erase the evidence of what? My own unraveling. The Siamese cat materialized in a puddle of shadow, its grin widening, a mockery of amusement. I flinched, the image jarring. It was closer than before, its eyes gleaming like chips of jade. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it away, but the image persisted behind my eyelids, a brand seared into my consciousness. The shard pulsed in my hand and the vision returned, stronger this time. The street scene solidified. A newsboy shouted headlines about a stock market boom. A woman in a beaded dress laughed, her voice a crystalline chime. I could smell the perfume, the coal smoke, the sweetness. But superimposed over the scene, a flicker-teving glimpse of the alleyway, the fog, my own face distorted in a reflection. The chanting warped, twisting into a discordant melody. Huntink, tink, asterisk, a music box played a mournful tune. The sound seemed to originate from within the shard itself. I felt a tremor run through my body, a vibration that resonated deep within my bones. I stumbled, catching myself on a crumbling brick wall. Another bruise appeared on my other arm, a matching purple bloom. I stared at my hands, trembling, the shard digging into my palm. The visions were becoming more frequent, more vivid, more fiery. The line between then and now was blurring, fracturing. I needed to ground myself. Something tangible. I turned. seeking solace in the familiar clutter of the shop. My gaze fell upon a porcelain doll, perched precariously on a shelf. Its painted eyes stared blankly ahead, its rosy cheeks unnervingly perfect. I reached out, my fingers brushing against its smooth, cold surface. The chanting seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. As I lifted the doll, a flash stiffy, a searing, instantaneous image slammed into my mind. My own face, superimposed over the doll. The fixed, unsettling smile mirroring my own. The vision vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving me gasping for air, the scent of coal smoke lingering in my nostrils. A single, sharp crack echoed in the stillness. The porcelain doll felt impossibly smooth, a deceptive warmth radiating from its painted surface. A phantom scent of lavender and mothballs clung to it, a ghost of my grandmother's house. The image 40 my face superimposed on the doll's sword replayed behind my eyelids, a silent film of unsettling mimicry. Failure, you'll never be enough. My mother's voice, a precise, clinical disappointment. The chanting intensified, a low thrum vibrating through the floorboards, up my legs, into my chest. Fatink, tink. The music box melody, mournful and insistent, seemed to seep from the doll itself. I needed to anchor myself. Silas's words, "The past isn't a spectator sport," echoed in my head. A taunt more than advice. He hadn't offered comfort, only a cryptic pronouncement. The shop seemed to shift subtly, imperceptibly. A stack of antique books I'd sworn was on the left side of the shelf now sat on the right. The fog outside pressed against the window panes, a suffocating grayness that seemed to bleed into the room itself. It wasn't the comforting fog of a London novel. It was a viscous, clinging thing that felt like it wanted to smother me. The compass, which I'd absent-mindedly placed on a nearby table, felt heavier now, a leaden weight in my hand when I picked it up. Its needle spun wildly, useless. It hadn't pointed toward anything since the shard. I felt a prickling sensation on my neck, the unsettling awareness of being watched. A faint, distorted giggle drifted from the shadows, too high-pitched to be human. It seemed to slither from the drainpipe outside, a sound that clung to the silence. The Siamese cat, a silent, grinning sentinel, had moved. It now perched on my shoulder, its claws digging into my coat. I tried to shake it off, but it clung with surprising strength. Its eyes, those jade chips, seemed to bore into my soul, reflecting not my own fear, but a detached amusement. I could feel the heat of its body against my neck, a strange, unnatural warmth. The chanting swelled. A chorus of voices I couldn't understand yet somehow recognized. Memories surfaced, unwelcome and sharp. My mother's perfectly sculpted eyebrows, her pursed lips, the way she'd dissect my every failure with the precision of a surgeon. The scent of lemon polish and resentment. I'd tried so hard to please her, to earn her approval. I'd memorized poetry, practiced piano scales until my fingers bled, all to the tune of a ticking clock. Tink, tink. The music box melody layered itself over the memory, a mocking soundtrack. The shop seemed to breathe, the shadows deepening, coalescing into shapes I couldn't quite define. I saw a flash of movement in the corner of my eye, a rocking horse swaying gently, a portrait on the wall tilting at an impossible angle. The laughter returned, louder now, a chorus of childish glee that sent a shiver down my spine. It seemed to emanate from the dolls lining the shelves, their painted eyes following my every move. I closed my eyes, trying to block it all out, to find a single point of stability. But the visions intensified, overwhelming my senses. I saw my mother's face, distorted and grotesque, her mouth stretched into a parody of a smile. I heard her voice, not the clinical disappointment of my childhood, but something colder, something alien. "You're becoming one of us, Seraphina," it hissed, the words slithering into my mind. I opened my eyes, gasping for air. The shop was tilting, the walls closing in. The cat pressed closer, its grin widening, a mockery of amusement. I reached out instinctively to touch its fur, to ground myself in something tangible. The chanting reached a fever pitch, a cacophony of voices that threatened to shatter my sanity. My fingers brushed against the cat's fur, and I recoiled. It wasn't fur at all. It was smooth, cold, like porcelain. A wave of nausea washed over me, a sickening realization dawning in my mind. I stared at the cat, at its fixed, unsettling grin, at its unblinking jade eyes. It wasn't a cat. It was another doll, perfectly crafted, meticulously rendered, waiting to be placed on a shelf. A low, guttural hum began to grow in intensity, emanating from the depths of the shop, a sound that promised something terrible. The compass needle thrashed, a frantic dance against the tarnished brass. It tugged, insistent, drawing my gaze downward, toward the shadowed maw of the basement stairs. Silas' hand landed on my arm, a surprisingly firm grip. "Don't tea," he said, his voice a low rumble lost in the rising chant. It wasn't tea to plea, more a clinical observation. "Failure, you'll never be enough." Asterisk the echo of my mother. His voice seemed to cling to the damp air, a phantom limb of disapproval. The steps groaned under my weight, each footfall a deliberate act of defiance. Tink, tink. Asterisk the music box melody seemed to burrow deeper, resonating in my bones. The air grew heavy, thick, with the scent of mildew and something else, something acrid, like burnt sugar and old regrets. The chanting intensified, a guttural drone that vibrated in my teeth. He, asterisk a faint whisper seemed to slither from the darkness below, a promise of something unseen. The basement was immense, not just large, but foot-long. The space seemed to stretch beyond what the shop's layout could possibly accommodate. Dust motes danced in the meager light filtering from the stairs, illuminating rows upon rows of stacked crates, their surfaces coated in a thick layer of grime. The heartbeat began, a slow, deliberate thudding that grew louder with each step I took. Thump, thump. Asterisk it wasn't my own. It resonated from the very foundations of the building, a monstrous pulse. Silas remained at the top of the stairs, a silent sentinel. "This is a mistake, Seraphina," he repeated, his voice barely audible above the chanting. I ignored him, pushing past his grasp. The compass spun wildly, its needle oscillating between north and nowhere. It felt like wading through treacle, the air pressing against my lungs, stealing my breath. The scent of burnt sugar intensified, mingling with the metallic tang of rust. The crates were filled with forgotten things, chipped porcelain dolls with vacant stares, stacks of yellowed sheet music moth, eaten velvet curtains. Each object seemed to hum with a silent, malevolent energy. Thump, thump. Asterisk the heartbeat accelerated, mirroring the rising panic in my chest. I stumbled over a loose floorboard, the sound echoing unnaturally loud in the vast space. A faint scratching noise came from behind a stack of crate civi, a rhythmic rasp like claws on wood, and then I saw it. A mirror. Not just any mirror, but a colossal, ornate thing that dominated the far wall. Its silvering was clouded with age, but it still reflected the basement back at me. Except, it wasn't quite right. The shadows were deeper, the dust thicker. The crates seemed to shift and rearrange themselves in the reflection. The whispering grew louder, closer. Perched on a velvet chair before the mirror sat the cat. It was larger now, its frame filling the space, its jade eyes glowing with an unsettling intensity. It regarded me with an almost palpable amusement, its grin wider than before. The porcelain feel of the doll. Cat pressed into my memory, a sickening wave of nausea rising in my throat. Thump, thump, thump. The heartbeat was a frantic drumbeat now, threatening to overwhelm me. I took a step closer to the mirror, drawn by an irresistible compulsion. The reflection of the basement behind me began to shimmer, to distort. The crates rearranged themselves again, forming a circle. The dust cleared, revealing figures. Men and women in flapper dresses and tailored suits, seated around a table draped in black velvet. A seance, a scene from 1928, playing out within the mirror's depths. The chanting reached a fever pitch, a swirling vortex of sound. The reflection wasn't merely showing a scene, it was becoming the scene. The air grew colder, the scent of burnt sugar, almost unbearable. The heartbeat threatened to burst from my chest. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the cold surface of the mirror. A child's voice, thin and reedy, whispered from the depths of the reflection, a sound that seemed to crawl directly into my ear. "Join us." The mirror surface rippled, the invitation echoing in my skull. "Join us." The child's voice, laced with a saccharine sweetness that curdled in my stomach. My hand remained pressed against the cold glass, a magnetic pull defying any rational thought. The chanting swelled, a suffocating wave of sound that seemed to originate not from the basement, but from within my own head. Hee. The whispers multiplied, a chorus of mocking amusement. The reflection fractured, the scene of the 1928 seance dissolving into a new vista. Gone were the flapper dresses and tailored suits, replaced by an endless expanse of dolls. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, lined rows upon rows stretching into the shadowed depths of a chamber I hadn't seen before. They were all different 2025. Some were Victorian infants with painted rosy cheeks. Others were Art Deco flappers with vacant, glittering eyes. Each one was frozen in a smile, a grotesque parody of joy. Click, 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 asterisk the sound of porcelain against porcelain, a rhythmic pulse that joined the relentless chanting. The air grew colder, the scent of burnt sugar now almost overwhelming, coating my tongue with a sickly sweetness. I tried to pull my hand away from the mirror, but it was as if it were glued to the surface. The dolls began to turn, slowly, deliberately, their porcelain heads swiveling to face me. Their eyes, painted with unsettling precision, seemed to feel live. They weren't reflecting light. They were emitting it, a cold, malevolent glow. Click, click, asterisk the sound intensified, a chorus of tiny, brittle noises. Then I saw Silas. He stood amongst the dolls, a spectral figure, bathed in the eerie light. His eyes were vacant, devoid of the weary cynicism I'd come to expect. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking through me, a hollow shell inhabited by something else. Thump, thump. Asterisk the heartbeat, once a monstrous pulse, now felt like a frantic drumbeat against my ribs, threatening to shatter them. This wasn't a shop. It wasn't even a basement. It was a prison. A repository for lost souls trapped within the porcelain smiles of these grotesque effigies. The chanting reached a crescendo, a swirling vortex of sound that seemed to solidify into tangible pressure. He. Asterisk the whispers coalesced into a single mocking voice. Welcome, Seraphina. It hissed, a chorus of voices layered upon one another. You belong here now. The cat materialized beside Silas, its jade eyes gleaming with an unsettling intelligence. It opened its mouth, and the chorus of whispers poured forth, a mocking parody of human speech. You tried to escape, little bird, but every cage has its keeper. The porcelain feel of the doll, cat pressed into my memory, a sickening wave of nausea rising in my throat. I struggled against the invisible force holding me captive, my muscles straining, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The reflection of the basement, the stairs, the world I knew, began to fade, swallowed by the encroaching darkness of the doll chamber. The chanting intensified, drowning out all other sounds. Click, click, asterisk the dolls continued to turn, their smiles widening, their eyes burning into my soul. Silas raised a hand, a slow, deliberate gesture. She, as one of us now, he intoned, his voice a hollow echo of the man I thought I knew. The cat purred, a low, guttural rumble that vibrated in my bones. Asterisk it seemed to resonate with the chanting, amplifying its power. A single doll broke from the ranks. It was a small, antique thing, dressed in a faded blue dress. Its porcelain hand, cold and brittle, extended towards me. The fingers, delicate and precise, reached out, a silent invitation. Click. Asterisk the sound echoed in the cavernous space, a chilling prelude to whatever fate awaited me. I felt the cold press of porcelain against my skin. The voices began as a tremor, a vibration against the inside of my skull, not the chanting, not that oppressive rhythmic drone. This was different, a chorus layered and indistinct, like 100 conversations bleeding into one another. Lost, afraid, alone. They slithered into my thoughts, not as words, but as feelings, amplified and distorted. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my palms against my ears. But the voices burrowed deeper. They echoed the anxieties I fought to suppress every morning, the fear that the progress I'd made was nothing more than a fragile facade. You can't escape it, Seraphina. It's in your blood. Silas's face swam into my vision, his eyes dull, his lips moving silently, as if trying to warn me. I strained to hear him, to grasp the meaning behind his vacant gaze. Destroy it, he seemed to mouth, a desperate plea lost in the rising tide of the chorus. The dolls, those frozen smiles, seemed to intensify the effect. Their eyes, those unsettling pools of light, focused on me, amplifying the voices, feeding them strength. I stumbled back, knocking against a towering display of Victorian mourning dolls, their black crepe veils rustling with a dry, whispering sound. Click, click. The sound of porcelain against porcelain seemed to mock my distress. A flash erupted from the shard I still clutched, a searing image searing itself onto my mind. It was me. But not me. This version was smooth, porcelain-like. My skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched taut over my bones. My eyes were vacant, devoid of any spark of life, mirroring the empty gazes of the dolls surrounding me. I was one of them, permanently affixed to a shelf, a grotesque parody of a human being. The image vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving a lingering chill, a suffocating sense of inevitability. The compass spun wildly in my hand, its needle a frantic blur, mocking my attempts to find a way out. Foolish girl. Fur. The voices hissed. Fur. The voices hissed. You are one of us? My breath hitched in my throat, a ragged gasp that echoed in the cavernous space. I wanted to throw the compass away, to shatter it against the floor, but my fingers seemed frozen, locked in place. The metallic tang of fear coated my tongue. Silas's image reappeared, clearer this time, though still trapped within the swirling chaos of the voices. He shook his head, a slow, deliberate movement that conveyed a profound sadness. Fit, don't listen to them, Seraphina. Fight it. His voice, though muffled, resonated with a desperate urgency. The cat, perched on its ornate chair, let out a low guttural chuckle, a sound that scraped against my nerves. Hera. The sound seemed to vibrate through the floor, through my bones. I focused on Silas, clinging to his fleeting presence as a lifeline. He was a reminder of the man I thought I knew, the man who had offered me a semblance of normalcy, a brief respite from the storm raging within me. But even he seemed to be slipping away, consumed by whatever force held this place captive. I looked into the mirror, the fragmented surface reflecting a distorted version of my own face. The image wavered, shimmered, and then changed. My skin appeared paler, almost translucent. The fine lines around my eyes seemed to deepen, etching themselves into my features. My eyes seemed to lose their focus, taking on a vacant, glassy quality. A tremor ran through my body, a subtle shift that felt both alien and horrifyingly familiar. The voices swelled, a triumphant crescendo. Welcome home, Seraphina. A single high-pitched giggle pierced the air. The tremor intensified, a physical pressure against my ribs. Welcome home, Seraphina. Asterisk the giggle, sharp and brittle, scraped against my sanity. I stared at the mirror, at the encroaching vacancy in my own eyes. Porcelain. That was the word that echoed in the void where my will used to be. I could too become one of them. I wouldn't too. The compass, still clutched in my hand, vibrated against my palm, a frantic pulse mirroring the chaos in my mind. Silas, image, a ghost within the storm, urged me onward. Fight it. Asterisk, but the voices, that insidious chorus, tightened their grip. Foolish girl. There is no escape. Asterisk, my hand moved, not of my own volition, but propelled by a desperate primal instinct. I raised the shard of glass, the fractured surface reflecting the distorted nightmare of my future. It felt cold, impossibly smooth against my skin, a mockery of warmth. The image of the porcelain Seraphina swam before my eyes, her vacant gaze a chilling prophecy. A surge of defiance, a flicker of the woman I once was, ignited within me. I didn't want to be a monument to decay, a frozen smile on a shelf. I wanted to feel again, to breathe air that wasn't teeth-thick with the scent of dust and despair. With a guttural cry, I hurled the shard. The impact resonated through the shop, a deafening fracashe that seemed to splinter the very air. Fragments of the giant mirror exploded outwards, showering the room in glittering shards. A blinding flash of light erupted, momentarily eclipsing the oppressive gloom. The chanting faltered, a discordant stutter in the relentless rhythm. The voices receded, their insidious whispers momentarily silenced. The dolls, those frozen sentinels, shuddered, their porcelain faces cracking with a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. The oppressive weight on my mind lessened just a fraction, but enough to allow a gasp of clean air into my lungs. And then he was gone, Silas. His spectral form dissolved into the swirling chaos, leaving only a lingering impression of profound sadness, a desperate plea hanging in the silent aftermath. A single tear traced a path down my cheek, tasting of salt and a forgotten hope. The cat, perched atop its ornate chair, vanished. Not a graceful disappearance, but a sudden, abrupt absence. Its grin, that unsettling parody of feline contentment, seemed to twist into a silent scream as it dissolved into the ether. Error. Asterisk, the vibration lingered, a phantom echo in the sudden quiet. The shop itself seemed to waver, the oppressive weight of the present momentarily lifting. For a heartbeat, the suffocating darkness receded, revealing something else. A vibrant scene teeming with life flickered into existence, superimposed over the decaying reality. I saw a bustling street filled with the sounds of laughter and music. Automobiles, gleaming with chrome and promise, honked their horns. Women in flapper dresses, their faces alight with joy, hurried along the sidewalk. Men in sharp suits, their voices a low murmur, negotiated deals and shared secrets. 1928. It was real. It was real. It was twin there. But beneath the veneer of that bygone era, something lurked. A darkness, subtle yet pervasive, clung to the edges of the scene, a shadow lurking just beyond the reach of the light. It was wrong. The smile seemed too wide, the laughter too brittle. The vibrant colors were muted, tainted with a sickly pallor. The vision flickered, threatened by the encroaching darkness. The chanting, though diminished, began to rebuild, a low, insidious hum that resonated deep within my bones. The dolls, though weakened, began to right themselves, their porcelain faces slowly returning to their frozen smiles. The mirror fragments, scattered across the floor, reflected the distorted scene. The vibrant street layered over the decaying shop, a grotesque juxtaposition of past and present. The metallic tang of fear returned, coating my tongue heavier this time. Amidst the shattered fragments, I saw it, reflected in 1,000 fractured surfaces, something different. Not my reflection, not Silas, not even the vibrant street scene from 1928. It was something lurking beneath, something dark and unnatural, woven into the very fabric of the past. A prolonged, distorted sigh. The chanting returned, a slow, insidious tide washing over the lingering silence. It wasn't the chaotic, fractured chorus from before, but a deliberate, measured rhythm that resonated deep within my bones, a vibration that seemed to loosen the very foundations of the shop. The mirror shards, glittering on the floor, shifted, subtly at first, then with a disconcerting fluidity reforming into a mosaic of fractured reflections. The vibrant street scene from 1928, that fleeting glimpse of a life I'd never known, began to recede, swallowed by the encroaching gloom. Dust motes, disturbed by the sudden stillness, danced in the weak light filtering through the grimy windows, each one a tiny silent witness to the shop's reclamation. The scent of decay, that pervasive odor of aged paper and forgotten things intensified, pressing against my lungs a suffocating weight. I tasted copper on my tongue, the metallic tang of fear amplified by the renewed pressure in my mind. The compass, still clutched in my hand, shuddered, the needle spinning wildly before settling, stubbornly directly toward me. A silent accusation. The dolls. They weren't gone, the brief respite had been a cruel illusion. Their porcelain faces, cracked and marred by the shard's impact, slowly, agonizingly, began to mend. A faint flicker echoed as each tiny fracture sealed itself, the sound like the settling of brittle bones. Their eyes, those vacant pools of manufactured innocence, refocused, locking onto me with an unnerving intensity. I felt a pressure behind my eyes, a dull ache that mirrored the growing dread in my gut. The shop itself seemed to breathe, the shelves rearranging themselves with a silent, unsettling grace. A chipped teacup, previously lying on its side, righted itself on a saucer. A faded photograph, depicting a family I didn't recognize, hung straighter on the wall. The order, the oppressive, suffocating order, was being restored. It was a meticulous, horrifying ballet of decay. I stumbled backward, my hand instinctively tightening around the compass. The vibration intensified, a persistent hum that threatened to shatter my teeth. The tea come home, Seraphina. The voice, though fainter than before, was unmistakable. A siren song promising oblivion. I resisted, digging my heels into the dusty floorboards, fighting against the pull. My muscles screamed in protest, a rebellion against an unseen force. Then, I saw it. Reflected in the newly rearranged debris, nestled amongst the glittering shards, a single porcelain hand emerged from the frame of a shattered mirror. It gripped the edges, its fingers long and slender, the porcelain smooth and cold. It wasn't a violent gesture, not a threat, but an invitation. A silent beckoning, a promise of something more. The cat reappeared. Not with a sudden burst of energy, but with a slow, deliberate materialization, as if coalescing from the shadows themselves. Its fur, a stark contrast to the monochrome palette of the shop, seemed to absorb the light, rendering it a creature of pure darkness. Its emerald eyes, those unsettling windows into a soul not its own, widened, the grin impossibly stretched, a parody of feline contentment twisted into something sinister. It wasn't the playful mocking grin from before. This was an invitation, a silent promise of welcome. A single, deliberate click, the compass needle, after its brief, frantic dance, now pointed directly at me, permanently fixed, an unwavering guide toward an unknown destination. The chanting swelled, a triumphant crescendo that drowned out all other sound. The porcelain hand tightened its grip on the mirror frame. The cat's grin widened further.